hello, Zack. How are you doing today?
Hey, Sara. Good to see you.
Welcome to the editor's table. This is the first time we're doing this.
We've been talking about it a lot, but I'm happy that we're here now. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is not going to be a very overly formal conversation. It's just a very interactive conversation that we usually have behind the scenes. But we thought we'd share it over here on camera as well and let our viewers and people listen in. So what do you think about this?
I think it's great. Can you imagine the polished Tearsheet, that the world sees versus like this behind the scenes thing, what that would look like? The messy kind of where the stories come from, the conversations we have to get to the right story. I think it's a totally different view of how we're looking at things. But I think it's instructive and illustrative in the sense that hopefully you get a chance for how we're thinking about things and where the stories come from, and why we chose to cover them in certain ways.
Yeah. Totally. And also this video and recording will include bloopers because this is a very raw footage of our conversation. But I hope our viewers will enjoy it. So let me start with a very random question, Zack. What is it something that you'd happily delegate and something you wouldn't at all?
Ooh. See, I figured you'd ask something like this because I know we're going to be talking about AI.
Yeah.
I think when I look at my life and I automatically go to AI when you ask me this idea of delegation, because that's where I feel I'm doing most of my delegation nowadays. I see that the what I choose to delegate and what I choose to keep my own is, I think, around a perimeter or a spectrum of creativity. I think for the things that I feel are creative that require me, what's special about Zack, given my perspective, my experiences, my interests, I tend to keep that on my own. Where I find AI useful, or just delegation in general useful, are those things that don't touch on creativity, which are more planning and logistics for me than personal, because those aren't things I'm particularly good at, and those aren't things I necessarily enjoy doing. At least in terms of creativity, I also find myself using AI, but not to write and not to create, but almost as a study partner, or a facilitator, where I'll create some prompts where it says, help me create this article by asking me these questions, these probing questions. Ask me to double click on that. Ask me to triple click on that, where it's almost like just externalizing that internal editorial voice or creative voice that I have, and allowing it to bring out my best stuff, my creative stuff, my human stuff. I find that that's what I'm doing. I'm curious here. What do you decide to delegate, and what do you decide to keep?
Yeah, so for me, it's related to decision making. If I want to buy an expensive laptop, I'd ask AI about all the options that I could look through, but eventually I'd like to make the final call. So, even if there are three best options, I'd like to make the final call and, see the final product that I finally want to go ahead with. So it's more about making that final call and decision making. And it's also one of the conversations that we are seeing around AI today, that what AI should be trusted with and what it shouldn't be trusted with. And I feel like Intuit is one of those firms that is also addressing these questions around which financial decisions should AI help with and which it shouldn't own at all.
One of the things before we jump into it, and I think it's a great example, is just curious about where you decide to delegate and what you don't, Sara, as a person. It's like you actually retain editorial control in your personal life when you're using AI. So it's like you're like an editor in and out of the newsroom. So I just thought that was an interesting perspective.
Yeah. So have you seen? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I know you wrote about Intuit last week, I believe it was, on some of the new agents that they've launched. I'm curious, maybe even before we jump into the Intuit specific story, how have you covered Intuit up until now? How do you see Intuit as an organization within our coverage universe?
So I feel like Intuit has a very specific strategy when it comes to their products and AI implementation. I've been following them for the last couple of years, or 2-3 years. And I feel like after every couple of months, they're there with some new announcements, which add to their existing ecosystem. And one of those was the launch of their new assistants
Hmm.
for Credit Karma, which includes a paycheck assistant, a refund assistant, and a debt assistant. So basically, what they're trying to do there is um, they have built these assistants around a two-stage workflow. So basically, there's this Credit Karma optimization engine paired with Gen AI capabilities. So it's not only about Gen AI taking over, but of course, Gen AI is very much important today in all the financial products that we are seeing and companies are using. So it's a mix of both. A few points that highlight this launch are that these agents use a shared financial context. That means that one assistant doesn't need to communicate or talk to the other assistant to know what's going on with a member's profile. So if it's a debt assistant, it would be very much having the same information as the other two assistants. But of course, their reasoning engines are different because they have individual tasks assigned to them, but they share a common financial data layer. So that are two highlights that are associated with them. And then there's another point coming back to my two-stage workflow. The process starts with Credit Karma's optimization engine, where it evaluates a member's profile using its linear optimization and event-based simulations. So that means it goes through a member's incoming payments, the loan they're carrying, interest rates, their financial goals, and stuff like that. And in the second step, that engine evaluates a few scenarios for the debt consolidation strategy. And then, based on an amortization formula, it comes up with the best possible solution for the debt consolidation. So, after all these things are done, only after all these calculations are done, does Gen AI take over. And at that stage, um, Gen AI will not recommend stuff or, suggest any recommendations. Its main purpose will be to explain and translate that structured outputs from the optimization engine and communicate it to the member in a way that's understandable for them and personalized for them in a step by step debt consolidation strategy. So, again, the final choice rests with the customer. If they want to go ahead with that, they can always do that and implement that strategy. So, this is a brief view of how those assistants work. And this is a deliberate architectural choice the company made when building these assistants because they didn't want the LLM freelancing or coming up with its own options or, also to reduce the risks of errors, hallucinations, and eventually building up trust with customers.
To me, it makes total sense. I really appreciate the way you explained it. And I think there are a couple of things here I'd like to unpack in the little time that we have together. One is that the decision, like you mentioned, the architecture, that it specifically uses a single set of customer data, the same
Yeah.
set of customer data. Uh, is that different than how you've seen like other products launch into the market, other agents being launched? Like, is that unique to Intuit Credit Karma?
Yeah, I feel like previously we had a one size fit all assistant or chatbots where, many banks and fintechs were using a similar kind of model where people and consumers would just come up with their XYZ queries. And the results for that were mixed. Sometimes they had their queries solved, but other times they would hit a wall, right?
Hmm.
Um, so with this, I feel like this is one step ahead in moving, in advancing in that model, because sharing a common data layer means you're having a more richer and deeper context of the customer you're dealing with, right? And context and background is something that's been talked about a lot nowadays when it comes to AI. Because we don't want to operate in silos. We want richer backgrounds. We want deeper understandings of our consumers. Um, it also reduces the risks of errors. So I feel like it gives the company a more holistic view of the customer that they're dealing with. And also, it's about having a bird's view of their financial journey. So it's
Hmm.
not like you're focusing on just the current phase that they're in, but you will also have a more broader view of what their journey has been like in the past, what is it today, and what they're aiming for in the future. So I feel like it's a very important thing that's in the works right now for a lot of companies. I feel like Bank of America is also following a similar direction. Um, its famous Erica Assistant, consumer facing assistant that launched in 2018, did really well according to all the numbers and reviews. And I believe a couple of years after that, the bank launched Erica Assist, which is an employee facing chatbot.
Hmm.
So, but recently, like just last month, the bank announced some recent upgrades to that Erica Assist. And what it does now is it assists its employees during their live calls with consumers, um, but it feeds on the 8-year data that Erica accumulated through its customer interactions. So again, it provides them with live context of the customer that they're dealing with, um, and helps them solve their queries in a more effective way. And with all these developments, I feel sorry, I'm not letting you speak.
No, I'm finding it fascinating. Thank you.
But like I'm just going in my flow. But I feel like this is an emerging trend in enterprise AI, and I feel like these companies that we talked about, they are having a similar pattern. If you observe, it's a combination of a shared financial data layer. Number one, number two, they have domain specific agents now for individual tasks and individual consumers. um, and number three, an orchestration layer that, decides which agent should step in when and where and for what task, and basically helping the whole system run in sync.
I want to come back to, I appreciate that. I want to come back to something you had said earlier, and that
Yeah.
was the decision that Intuit Credit Karma made to not make decisions on behalf of the customer, but it's more like an informational exchange. And I'm
Yeah.
curious if you could share a little bit more about that. If you think eventually that's where things are headed, um, maybe just talk about why that decision was made from what you understand.
So I feel like, again, going back to our previous points, I feel like human in the loop is a very much important factor when we're
Hmm.
dealing with AI, right? So AI can automate, help you in your tasks, save time and stuff like that, and even help companies. So I feel like when I was going through this topic, I also had another thought in my mind, that there's a customer centric technology, and then there's a tech approach.
Hmm.
So I feel like companies are building these things to help themselves as well as the consumer. And it's a two-way equation. It goes both ways.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like human in the loop will and should remain as it is. Because again, like going back to our initial anecdote, I'd like my decision making to be there with me. I can have different options. Um, I can get suggestions from all these tools and AI platforms. But again, I still feel like I should be making the final choice. So even if you present me with a strategy, with a debt consolidation plan, I should be the one making the final call. So I feel like Intuit is doing that with the help of its agents. It is facilitating the consumers and just giving them suggestions and options that what could be the best solution to their problem. But again, the customer has to make the final call. And
I get that too.
uh,
Yeah.
I'd also like to ask you that how do you feel about this? Do you also feel like you should be the one making the final call, or you'll be okay with an agent or AI making the final call?
I think, like you, I enjoy the control of making important decisions at the end of the day. Even if all the work has been done for me up to that point, I do want to be the person who makes that click and have that retain that final sort of authority over making that. For me, maybe it's about control. I don't necessarily trust machines at the end of the day and that may be an age thing or I don't know, but I do kind of like that idea. I think what you described well that Intuit Credit Karma is doing, and by the way, this is a very interesting conversation because 5 years ago we wouldn't have been talking about Intuit in this sense because Credit Karma is
Mhm.
like that's their whole consumer platform for decades. Intuit was focused on small business, so like even the fact that we're talking about consumer finance and Intuit to me is actually funny as we're having this conversation. Um, but I kind of think that it's what's interesting for me at the end of the day is that I don't think of myself as a financial customer in silos. And I think you made this point. It's like especially with debt consolidation, that has to do with like things that are within a single product and things that span multiple products, right? You have to be able to look across my life. You have to look across my paycheck. You have to do some forecasting into the future. And so because I can't think in a silo about my life, like I want the tools and the data and the information that I'm getting from my providers to help me make sense of it all. And it sounds like that's what these new agents are doing.
Yeah. So again, this is another question which is related to AI, but not necessarily related to Intuit. And I'm asking this because, like, you're a boomer, I am a millennial, so I just want to, exchange
Not
our
quite a
views.
boomer. I'm Gen X, but okay. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that.
That's
Um, uh,
okay.
yeah, but I just wanted to have your view on how you feel about AI-powered chatbots.
Hmm.
Because Okay, you go first, and then I'll share what I feel about it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You mentioned Erica, and obviously Erica, I think, really was in terms of a branded chatbot, like a pioneer in our space. I think it was like to me, it feels like the early generation of AI, like that they came up with instead of using a search bar, they came up with a chatbot, which feels like somehow of a more evolved like I'm having a conversation with things. I find it
Hmm.
tiresome now. I kind
Uh,
of believe we'll get to a point where AI is integrated within workflows where it's not necessarily a chat interface. Maybe it's just small prompts along the way, prompts for me as a human to click yes or click no or ask for more information. Where I kind of would like, I find it tiresome now having to talk to the chatbot. How about you?
yeah. So I feel like I'm okay using it as long as it's a very simplified process. Like if I have to go from point A to point B, um, chatbot is fine. But if I'm calling some organization or a bank and I have a customized problem that I'm facing, and I have to go from point A to point, let's say, D, through points B, C, and those are very complicated, trajectories that we have to go
Mm-hmm.
through. So I feel like I get a little annoyed over there,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I feel like, again, the chatbot is giving very generic answers, or it doesn't understand the exact problem I'm going through, and I want to get hold of a human rep, right? So I feel like for simplified processes, it's fine, totally fine. But if it's a little complicated or a more customized problem that I'm facing, I feel annoyed. And this also brings me to another point, that all these companies, financial firms, banks, and fintechs, they share figures and numbers that their chatbots are doing great in terms of numbers and everything. But I feel like, what if consumers don't have a choice? Like, they're only having these chatbots in front of them, and they have to deal with them because, like, they have to have some sort of idea about the problem they're facing. But that's actually what's triggering those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's adding to those numbers. Like, so and so bank says that they had maybe, like, let's say 10K interactions in 1 month. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe those interactions are by repeat customers. It's because they're not able to find a solution to their problem, and they're
Yeah.
not able to get connected with a human representative. So, what do you think about this?
Yeah, at Tearsheet, a lot in the editorial room, we talk about like headline numbers versus important numbers, informational numbers with informational value. Like a headline number could be like, yeah, 1 billion interactions over the past year. But that doesn't really tell you anything, right? Because that number is going to continue to go up over time just by the sake that you said you don't have very many other options. And just over
Yeah.
time, those numbers will continue to go up. Doesn't mean they're necessarily doing a good job. So I think, I think we're so early in the AI phase that we're still looking for the right metrics, how to define things. Um, one thing I think we'll speak about in future conversations is like banks figuring out how to determine if there's ROI in their AI investments. And I think once we have that, once those ideas mature, we'll be able to talk about like what are the right metrics, what are the metrics that matter, right? Like, are customers actually doing more business and more engaged with their bank because of the AI interface? If that's the case, that's great. Like, keep it going. If it's just because you've removed other options, as you were describing, and just by the sake of time passing, you're going to have more and more headline usage numbers. Like, that doesn't really tell you very much. So I think we're just in the early stages of that. I'm excited to see kind of where we go in terms of like finding the right metrics.
Right. Um, yeah, that's totally a valid point. And I also feel like, by the end of 2025, we were just starting to hearing about agentic
Mm-hmm.
AI. And now, 6 months in, uh, we are like seeing all these news and product developments left, right, and center around agentic AI, which is kind of like crazy because it's totally blown.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say about that? Because I remember I was doing this story in December 2025, and you said, like, isn't it too early to talk about this? And I was like, but I want to explore this because it's a new thing that
Mm-hmm.
I'm across in conversations and interviews.
Yeah, I think for me, that expression, that comment that I gave to you in December of last year, that was the Zack editor who had been burned by how long it's taking for Web3 technologies to be taken up. And I
Oh,
think that's one of the things that's so impressive about this technological wave with AI is the actual speed, how fast everything is changing. And so, like, you know, as a kid, I was reading tech magazines like in the late 90s, and they didn't have the term agentic AI or agentic commerce, but they were talking about agents that would end up doing things for you. And it seemed like so futuristic, back then. But we're in that we're there now. And then, like, within the speed at which things are changing, getting launched, tested, and actually taken up and being used in the market is astounding to me. So I am seeing banks talking a lot about agentic, and they typically start with like and they will have vast agentic libraries over time, I believe. But like they generally start with simple ones. I think the chatbot is one of the best ways to look at that. But they start with stuff behind the scenes that doesn't necessarily touch an end customer or make decisions for a customer. But I definitely think that as 2027, which we're going to be at pretty soon, I think it's going to be all about agentic banking, agentic commerce as well. And I know one of the things that you're looking at in your writing is like when we move to a level of agentic, it's not just having technology to do it. It's like all kinds of things that we need to sort out within that. Like if things go wrong, who's responsible for all this kind of stuff? You're kind of asking like those governance issues that need to be solved first before you can actually let anything out into the wild.
Yeah. JP Morgan Payments is very much active in these conversations when it comes to governance frameworks and standardized rules. KeyBank also talked about this in one of my interviews. So people are starting to think about the governance part because, again, we should have a framework established before things move ahead. And it's always a good idea to have the accountability equation in check before, diving deeper into all these complicated spaces and things. So yeah, that's one of the conversations that's doing a lot of rounds nowadays. Is there any other company that you think is following a similar route or direction like Intuit or Bank of America when it comes to agents or assistants?
I think they're all banks. The major banks that we're looking at are working on them. I typically think of Intuit before we had this conversation, but in my coverage of Intuit over the past years, I've been doing a little bit longer than you because you can see the gray hairs. To me, Intuit seems to be always a pretty good example of where market trends are headed. We saw that with embedded finance. For me, they were one of the few examples where we could talk about like, hey, here's a real life example. Everyone's talking about embedded finance, about putting banking or payments like at the moment of need and not necessarily like somewhere in a place you have to go take care of those things. Intuit, was early there, and I think has typically been early enough where they're one of a handful of examples, case studies I can point to say, hey, this to me is how companies are doing it. I can't really point to other. I think JP Morgan's the one on the banking side that I can do that as well. I can't really name other banks I think that would stand out in such the same way.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Intuit has been one of the pioneers in all these trends. What do you think about Tactile? In terms of its agentic developments or in terms of their AI strategy?
Yeah, so Tactile's really interesting. It is a company that is launching its own library of agents, and just as importantly, on top of it, has a decision-making layer, which I think is exactly the problem that you addressed when you covered Intuit in this way in Credit Karma. Is that it's not like creating the agents is not necessarily the hard part. It's like, can you take the information from that single source of data about a customer, bring in all the different products that might touch that customer or experiences that might touch that customer and help the customer make a decision out of it. And I think without a decision making layer, a really robust one that can actually, this is what's missing in all the cross functionality, cross selling within banks. It's like, it's one thing technologically. Okay, so banks run on different silos. They've got different products running on different technology layers, right? And so like, there's not really one data capacity that holds like a single source of information about the customer. So you've got to work around it all that. At the end of the day, you still need something sitting on top that says, hey, I've got a customer. I see Sara. I know what her needs are because I can see the data. I know how she's worked with us in the past. Here's how I think she can work with us in the future. If you don't have that technology sitting kind of coordinating all of it, the air traffic control, of all the systems, then you're not really solving the biggest problem from then customers, like, help me be more successful in my financial life,
Yeah, totally agree. So I feel like we had a very nice conversation about
We did.
AI, agentic AI, and some of the firms that we touched on that are doing good work in this regard. any closing thoughts you have on our inaugural?
No, I think in our inaugural, I think we did a good job as well. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Sara. Thanks for joining me.
Same here, Zack. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.